"She's not your daughter," the little black girl whispered, and Harrison Whitmore's hand stopped 1 inch from Vanessa Caldwell's finger. The diamond ring slipped from his grip, struck the marble aisle with a sound too small for the size of the room, and rolled beneath the white roses. No one moved. The bride kept smiling, but one petal snapped in her fist. 30 minutes earlier, the ballroom at the Fairmont Grand smelled of gardenias, candle wax, and a perfume Nia Brooks did not recognize but would never forget. It hung in the air too sweetly, like someone had tried to cover the scent of rain. Nia stood near the service door in a brown coat with one missing button, holding her mother's sewing box against her chest. Inside the box were spools of white thread, a silver thimble dented on one side, 3 bent needles wrapped in tissue, and the corner of something old her mother had told her never to show strangers. She had not come to be seen. She had come because her mother, Grace Brooks, had spent 2 hours in the laundry room fixing the bride's torn veil after one of the bridesmaids stepped on it. Grace had pressed the veil smooth with tired hands, folded it over Nia's arms, and whispered, "Take this to the lady in white, baby. Hand it to staff only. Then come right back." Nia had promised. She always promised when her mother's voice got that thin, careful sound it had whenever rich people were involved. The ballroom was brighter than any place Nia had ever entered. Gold chandeliers floated above the guests. White roses climbed the walls. Men in dark suits touched their earpieces and watched every corner. At the front, Harrison Whitmore stood tall and still in a black tuxedo, a man whose name Nia had seen on hospital buildings, charity banners, and the side of a clinic bus that never stopped on her street. He looked powerful enough to buy the whole room and lonely enough not to know what to do with it. Beside him, Vanessa Caldwell held her bouquet with perfect fingers and a perfect smile. Behind Vanessa stood a small flower girl in a white dress, her curls pinned with tiny pearls, her eyes lowered to the basket of petals in her hands. Nia should have handed the veil to a coordinator and left. She almost did. Then the flower girl turned her head. Just a little. Just enough for the chandelier light to slide behind her ear. Nia's breath caught. The sewing box pressed hard into her ribs. She knew that mark. She had seen it in the faded photograph her mother kept under the blue towel in the bottom drawer. The photograph Grace only touched on the nights she thought Nia was asleep. A tiny crescent behind a baby's right ear. A baby named Maya. A baby who had vanished from St. Agnes Clinic 7 years ago, while the power was out and nobody important answered Grace Brooks's calls. Nia looked at the girl again. The child's hand trembled around the flower basket. Vanessa leaned back without turning and whispered something through her smile. The girl's shoulders tightened. At the altar, the minister asked for the ring. Harrison reached into his jacket pocket. Nia felt the old photograph in the sewing box like it had become warm. She took one step out from the service door. Then another. A security guard frowned. A bridesmaid's mouth opened. Nia did not run. She walked straight toward the Billionaire as the room began to notice the little girl in the worn brown coat crossing the white aisle. Harrison turned only when she touched his sleeve. "Sir," Nia said, barely louder than the violin. He looked down, irritated at first, confused by her small hand on his tuxedo. "Not now," he murmured. Nia lifted her eyes to the flower girl, then back to him. "Please," she whispered, "before you put that ring on her hand." Something in her voice, not fear exactly, but certainty, made Harrison pause. Vanessa's smile stayed in place, but the flower girl slowly raised one hand and covered the spot behind her right ear. The motion was so small most people would have missed it, but Harrison Whitmore did not. The little girl in the white dress had not reached for her pearls, or brushed away a curl, or fixed the ribbon at her neck. She had covered the exact place Nia had looked. Harrison's fingers tightened around the ring box, though the ring itself was no longer there. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice low enough that only the first 2 rows heard the danger inside it. Nia did not step back, even when the security guard moved closer behind her. "She's not her daughter," she said, and this time her eyes flicked toward Vanessa. "The flower girl. She's not who they said she is." A ripple moved through the ballroom like wind through tall grass. Someone gave a nervous laugh. Someone else whispered, "Is she from the hotel staff?" Vanessa's mother, Patricia Caldwell, rose from the front pew with a practiced smile, the kind women used at charity luncheons when something unpleasant needed to be made invisible. "Sweetheart," Patricia said, each word soft and sharp, "this is a private family ceremony. I'm sure whatever you need can be handled outside." Nia looked at her but did not answer. She held the sewing box tighter, its metal latch pressed into her palm until it hurt. Harrison glanced at the box, then at her coat, then at the scuffed toes of her shoes against the polished marble aisle. "Who brought you in here?" he asked. "My mama sent the veil back," Nia said. "She fixed it." Vanessa let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh, and lifted one hand to her chest. "Harry, this is clearly some kind of misunderstanding. The staff must have sent her to the wrong door." She turned just enough to show the guests her wounded face, but not enough to look at the flower girl behind her. "Evelyn is frightened." At the sound of that name, the child in white flinched. The violinist lowered his bow. From somewhere near the bar came the tiny clink of a spoon against glass, absurdly clear in the silence. Rain ticked against the tall windows beyond the orchids, steady and delicate, like the room was pretending nothing had broken. Harrison noticed Vanessa's perfume again, sweet and heavy, the same scent clinging faintly to the repaired veil in Nia's arms. Then he noticed something else. The veil had a second security tag clipped inside the lace, not the hotel's white tag, but a small black one from the bridal suite upstairs. Nia had not been sent through the guest entrance. Someone had wanted that veil delivered quietly. "Evelyn," Harrison said gently, without looking away from Vanessa. "Come here for a second." Vanessa's smile tightened. "She's fine where she is." It was a mother's sentence on the surface, protective and calm, but her fingers closed around the flower girl's shoulder before the child could move. Nia saw it. Harrison saw Nia see it. "Sir," Nia whispered, "if I'm lying, just ask her to show you behind her ear." Patricia's expression hardened. "This is cruel. That child has been through enough." "What child?" Nia asked. Her voice stayed small, but the question cut through the room. "Yours, or the one you renamed?" Harrison's face did not change, but something in his eyes did. He bent slowly, picked up the fallen ring with a handkerchief, and slipped it into his pocket instead of putting it back in the box. Then he looked at the security guard and said, "Nobody touches her." Vanessa's smile disappeared for half a second. Only half a second, but long enough for Nia to open the sewing box with trembling fingers and reveal the corner of an old photograph tucked beneath the white thread. Nia lifted the photograph with 2 fingers, careful not to touch the face printed in the center, as if even now the baby in the picture needed protecting. The room leaned toward it without meaning to. It was not a clean photograph, not the kind framed on silver tables in houses like Harrison Whitmore's. Its corners were soft and gray from being held too many times. A pale crease ran through the blanket, and the colors had faded until the hospital blue looked almost like fog. But the baby's face was clear. So was the tiny crescent-shaped mark behind her right ear. Harrison stared at it for a long second, then looked past Nia to the flower girl. Evelyn had gone very still. Vanessa's hand remained on the child's shoulder, not squeezing hard enough for anyone to accuse her of cruelty, but firm enough to keep her from turning. "Where did you get that?" Harrison asked. His voice was calm, controlled, the voice of a man who had once talked bankers out of panic and grieving families into signing hospital contracts. "My mama's drawer," Nia said, "under the blue towel." A few guests murmured, as if that answer proved she did not belong in the room. Nia heard them, but she did not lower the photo. "She looks at it when she thinks I'm asleep." Vanessa gave a quiet, wounded laugh. "Harry, this is heartbreaking, but it proves nothing. Children see similarities everywhere. A mark, a curl, a face in an old picture. Someone has filled this little girl's head with a story." "Nobody filled my head," Nia said. "My mama told me not to talk about it." That made Harrison blink. "Then why are you talking now?" Nia looked at Evelyn. The child's eyes were shining, fixed on the photograph like something in it was calling from very far away. Because she covered it, Nia whispered. When I looked at her ear, she knew. Patricia Caldwell stepped closer, her pearls clicking softly against the neckline of her dress. This is enough. That child is upsetting my granddaughter. Nia turned her head slowly. You said she was your granddaughter. Patricia's smile stayed in place, but her eyes sharpened. She is. Then why did you call her Eleanor in the hallway? The silence changed shape. Not louder, not bigger, just colder. Patricia's mouth opened, then closed. Vanessa looked at her mother for one quick second. A look so fast only someone watching for lies would catch it. Harrison caught it. So did Nia. I heard you, Nia said. By the gold elevator. You said, keep Eleanor away from the staff entrance until the ceremony starts. But everybody here calls her Evelyn. Vanessa recovered first. My mother was nervous. Eleanor is a family name. She misspoke. She didn't sound nervous, Nia said. She sounded mad. The security guard shifted behind her, uncomfortable now, unsure whether he was protecting the wedding or standing too close to a child telling the truth. Harrison held out his hand. May I see the photo? Nia hesitated. It was the first time fear crossed her face. Not fear of him exactly, but fear of what rich adults could do with poor people's evidence once it left their hands. She looked at the handkerchief in his other hand, the one holding the fallen ring in his pocket, then placed the photograph on the open lid of the sewing box instead of giving it to him. You can look, she said, but it stays with me. Something moved behind Harrison's eyes, small but real. He bent, instead of taking it from her. On the back, in faded blue ink, were 3 words and a date written by a tired hand. Maya Brooks, St. Agnes. Below it, almost rubbed away, was a time. 11:52 p.m. Harrison did not touch the picture. He only stared at the name of the clinic, and for the first time since Nia had pulled his sleeve, his face lost a little color, because St. Agnes was not just a name from the past. It was printed in gold on the hospital wing his company had renamed 5 years ago. Rain tapped softly against the ballroom windows, a delicate sound that made the silence inside feel even more expensive. Harrison was still looking at the words on the back of the photograph when Grant Ellison stepped forward from the second row, closing the button of his tuxedo jacket as if the ceremony had become a board meeting. He was a polished man in his 50s, silver hair, calm eyes, the kind of lawyer who never raised his voice because he had spent 30 years making other people lower theirs. Mr. Whitmore, Grant said carefully, I strongly advise we pause this conversation and remove the child from the ceremony floor. Nia's fingers closed around the sewing box. Remove me where? She asked. Grant gave her a polite smile without warmth. Somewhere appropriate, sweetheart. This is an adult matter. A few guests nodded, relieved to hear someone make the room feel normal again. A wedding planner in a black dress appeared near the aisle with a headset pressed to one ear. Behind her, 2 hotel security guards stood beside the service door, not touching Nia, but making it very clear where they thought she belonged. Patricia Caldwell exhaled as if kindness itself had exhausted her. No one is angry with you, she said, but you have interrupted a sacred family moment with a very serious accusation you cannot possibly understand. The words were gentle enough for the guests, cold enough for Nia. Harrison heard the sentence land, and something in his jaw tightened, but he did not stop it yet. His eyes moved from Grant to Patricia to Vanessa, measuring. Vanessa had lowered herself slightly beside the flower girl now, one hand smoothing the child's sleeve, her face arranged into motherly concern. Evelyn, baby, don't listen to any of this, she whispered, loud enough to be heard. Sometimes people see a rich family and invent pain to get close to it. Nia's face changed, not much, just enough to show that the sentence had found her. She looked down at her shoes, the scuffed brown leather against the white runner, and for a second the ballroom made her look impossibly small. Chandeliers above her, cameras near the balcony, men with earpieces, women in silk. A billionaire's wedding stopped by a child whose mother hemmed dresses by the hour. Grant turned to Harrison again. Harry, you have verified documents. Birth certificate, custody transfer, DNA summary, court filings. I reviewed all of it personally. A faded photograph and a child's memory cannot outweigh legal records. Then show him the records, Nia said. Grant paused. The room heard it. Nia lifted her eyes. If the papers are true, show him slow. A small sound moved through the guests. Not quite laughter. Not quite shock. Vanessa stood, her smile returning because she thought she had the room back. Of course, she said. Grant, please. Let's end this with dignity. Grant's assistant hurried forward with a black leather folder embossed with Harrison's initials in gold. The folder looked heavier than Nia's whole sewing box. Grant opened it on a nearby champagne table, arranging the pages with smooth fingers. Evelyn Caldwell, he read, born October 18th, St. Agnes Medical Center. Maternal guardian Vanessa Caldwell. Harrison stared at the page. Nia stared too. Outside, thunder rolled far away, low and tired. For one breath, the only sound inside was the faint buzz of the wedding planner's headset. Then Nia pointed, not at the name, not at the signature, but at the line beneath the hospital stamp. That says 2:12 a.m., she said. My mama wrote 11:52 p.m. Patricia's smile sharpened. Hospitals make corrections. Nia nodded once. Then why did your mother call her Eleanor before she corrected herself? Vanessa's hand froze on the flower girl's shoulder. Grant turned a page too quickly, but not before Harrison saw the small paper clipped behind the birth certificate. A visitor badge from St. Agnes, dated October 17th, with Vanessa Caldwell's name printed on it. Harrison did not reach for the visitor badge at first. He simply looked at it where it sat half hidden behind the birth certificate, the plastic edge catching the chandelier light like a sliver of ice. Vanessa's name was printed in faded black ink, and beneath it, in smaller letters, St. Agnes Maternity Wing, October 17th, 11:04 p.m. For several seconds, no one spoke. Grant's hand hovered over the page, still from the mistake of turning too quickly. Then he gave a soft, professional cough and slid the badge back under the document. Old access logs were often attached during archival transfers, he said. It is not unusual. Nia looked at him. Then why hide it? The question was quiet, but it reached the balcony. Vanessa's smile stayed in place, though the skin beneath her eyes tightened. Because it doesn't matter, she said gently, as if explaining manners to a child. I visited hospitals all the time. My family supports medical charities. Harry knows that. Harrison did know that. He knew the Caldwell name was carved into hospital plaques, charity wings, scholarship dinners, recovery rooms with soft blue walls. He also knew Vanessa had once told him she had never been to St. Agnes until after Evelyn was born. The difference was small. A sentence from months ago. A dinner conversation over salmon and white wine. But now it moved through his mind with a cold precision. Nia reached back into the sewing box. This time she did not take out the photograph. She moved aside the thread, the thimble, the torn packet of needles, and lifted a small plastic bag folded twice and sealed with tape. Inside was an old hospital bracelet, cloudy with age, the letters rubbed thin but not gone. She held it against her chest for a moment before offering it out. Not to Grant, not to Vanessa, but toward Harrison. My mama said not to give this to anybody who smiles while calling her confused, Nia said. But you dropped the ring. Harrison looked at her. What does that mean? It means maybe you heard me. The room went still again, but this stillness was different, less offended, more afraid. Harrison took the plastic bag with the edge of his handkerchief. The bracelet inside read Baby Brooks, female, St. Agnes, October 17th. The timestamp was blurred, but the first two numbers were clear, 23. Military time, 11 at night, not 2 in the morning, not October 18th. He stared at it long enough that the wedding planner's headset crackled from somewhere behind him, a tiny burst of static that made Evelyn flinch. Then, from the bar area, a television no one had turned off murmured the late local news beneath the rain tapping the glass. Ordinary sounds. Safe sounds. Sounds that did not belong beside a stolen name. Vanessa stepped closer. Harry, don't let her hand you contaminated evidence in the middle of our wedding. The phrase sounded reasonable, legal, clean, but Harrison heard the word evidence, and he realized Vanessa had said it before anyone else had. Nia had only called it a bracelet. He lifted his eyes slowly. How did you know it was evidence? Vanessa's lips parted, just barely. Grant answered too fast. Harry, she means alleged evidence. Harrison did not look at Grant. He was watching Vanessa now, watching the way her fingers tightened around her bouquet, watching the way she avoided the flower girl's face. And behind her, Evelyn whispered so softly it almost disappeared under the rain. I had one of those. Evelyn's whisper did not travel far, but it reached the people who mattered. Harrison heard it. Nia heard it. Vanessa heard it too, because her hand tightened around the bouquet so sharply that another white petal broke loose and drifted to the floor. Sweetheart, Vanessa said, turning with the gentlest voice in the room. You were a baby. You don't remember hospital bracelets. Evelyn looked down at her flower basket. I remember plastic on my foot, she whispered. It scratched. The ballroom held its breath. Harrison did not move toward Vanessa. He did not accuse her. He did not raise his voice. Instead, he folded the handkerchief around the plastic bag and slipped it into his inside jacket pocket beside the fallen ring. Grant, he said, still calm, I want the complete St. Agnes archive file. Pulled tonight. Grant's expression barely changed, but the pause before his answer was too long. Of course, after the ceremony, we can handle that properly. Not after, Harrison said. Now. Then he turned slightly toward a woman standing near the sidewall in a charcoal suit. His head of security, Michelle Reyes. She had been watching without expression, one hand resting near her earpiece. Harrison did not gesture dramatically. He only said, Michelle, find the hotel's hallway footage from the bridal suite, service elevator, and west staff entrance. Last 3 hours. Have copies sent to my personal phone, not the foundation server. Grant's eyes flicked up. Vanessa's smile stayed soft. Patricia looked relieved, as if adults were finally taking over. They did not yet understand the important part. Harrison was no longer asking the people inside the story to explain the story. He was checking the walls around it. Rain slid down the tall windows behind the altar, turning the city lights into long gold lines. Somewhere near the bar, the television murmured about traffic on I-95. A waiter, frozen with a tray of untouched champagne, shifted his weight and one spoon tapped gently against a glass. The tiny sound gave the room one breath of ordinary life before Nia made it vanish. She stepped closer to Harrison and spoke without looking at Vanessa. My mama didn't send me here for money. Harrison looked down at her. What did she send you for? Nia held up the folded veil. For this. She fixed it because your bridespeople said they wouldn't pay unless it looked perfect. Her voice stayed steady, but her fingers pressed into the lace. My mama said rich people can forget your name and still remember a crooked stitch. Harrison's face changed, just a little. Did they pay her? Nia shook her head once. They said after the wedding. Vanessa let out a quiet sigh. Harry, please. Are we really going to discuss a seamstress invoice during our vows? Yes, Harrison said softly. Maybe we are. He looked at the veil in Nia's hands. The lace was beautiful, expensive, a cloud of handwork and pearls. But along the inner edge, near the comb, one narrow seam sat slightly, raised, as if something flat had been stitched beneath it. Harrison saw it because Nia was touching it. Nia saw that he saw. She whispered, Mama didn't sew that part. Michelle stepped forward with small scissors from the emergency tailoring kit beside the wedding planner. Vanessa's breath caught, but she covered it with a laugh. This is absurd. Harrison did not answer. He watched Michelle cut one careful stitch, then another. The seam opened. A thin strip of cloudy plastic slid out and landed on the champagne table. Half a hospital bracelet. The cut edge matched the one in Harrison's pocket. For the first time that night, Harrison turned not to Vanessa, but to Grant, and understood with a cold, sinking clarity that the man who had cleaned every document for him had also known exactly where the dirt was buried. Grant's eyes dropped to the half-bracelet on the champagne table, then rose to Harrison's face with the discipline of a man trying not to calculate in public. Vanessa saw it too. Not the bracelet. The look between them. For 1 second, the bride and the lawyer stood on opposite sides of the same secret, each waiting for the other to speak first. Harrison let the silence stretch until even the guests who wanted this to be over stopped moving. Then he said, "Vanessa, I need you to help me settle something." His voice was almost gentle. That made it worse. Vanessa lifted her chin. "Of course." Harrison took the photograph from the open sewing box without removing it from Nia's sight, holding it low enough that she could still reach it. "You told me Evelyn was born at St. Agnes in the early morning." "Yes," Vanessa said. "October 18th. And you were there." "I was her mother, Harry." The answer was smooth, wounded, perfect. Nia stared at the floor for a moment, thinking. Then she looked at Evelyn's shoes, white satin with tiny bows, and said, "Ask her what color the blanket was." Vanessa turned slowly. "What?" Nia kept her fingers on the sewing box latch. "When babies leave St. Agnes, the nurses wrap them in blue blankets. My mama said Maya had one. The picture has one. But if she was there, she knows." Harrison looked at Vanessa, not accusing, not angry. "What color was the blanket?" A phone began vibrating somewhere in Grant's jacket. Once, twice, 3 times. No one reached for it. The tiny buzz filled the space between Harrison's question and Vanessa's answer. Vanessa gave a soft, unbelieving laugh. "Harry, no mother remembers the color of every hospital blanket after 7 years." "My mama does," Nia said. Vanessa's eyes flashed toward her. It was quick, but the sweetness dropped from her face like a curtain slipping off a rod. "Your mother," Vanessa said, "has had years to rehearse grief." The room went cold. Nia did not answer. She only looked at Harrison. Harrison's face stayed still, but his hand closed once at his side. "Answer the question," he said. Vanessa inhaled. "White," she said. "It was a white blanket." Evelyn's head lifted. Nia looked at the photograph. Harrison did too. The blanket was blue, not pale enough to mistake. Blue with a faded yellow duck stitched near one corner. Harrison turned the photograph slightly toward Vanessa. "This one." Vanessa's lips parted, and for the first time, she had no elegant sentence waiting. Grant's phone kept vibrating. Michelle Reyes stepped closer, holding her own phone. A small file transfer bar glowed on the screen, crawling toward completion. "Sir," she said quietly, "the hallway footage is downloading." Harrison did not look away from Vanessa. "Good." Patricia Caldwell stepped forward, one hand gripping the back of a chair. "This is grotesque. You are interrogating a bride at her own wedding because a child brought a picture." "No," Harrison said. "I'm asking a woman who says she is a mother to remember one thing a mother would not forget." Nia touched the lid of the sewing box, then whispered, "And she called her Eleanor." Vanessa's eyes moved to Nia again, but this time Nia was no longer standing alone in the aisle. Harrison had shifted half a step beside her, close enough that the security guard moved back without being told, and Vanessa understood before anyone said it. The child she had tried to remove had become the person Harrison was listening to. The file finished downloading with a tiny chime that sounded almost indecent in the ruined hush of the ballroom. Michelle Reyes did not play it right away. She looked at Harrison first, waiting for permission, and he gave one small nod. The screen in her hand cast a pale blue light over the champagne table, over the fallen petals, over Nia's sewing box and the half-bracelet lying beside the black leather folder. The footage opened on the West Staff hallway 3 hours earlier. No music. No bows. Just a narrow corridor behind luxury, gray walls, stacked linen carts, and fluorescent light. Vanessa appeared first, not in her wedding dress yet, but in a silk robe walking fast beside Grant Ellison. Between them was Evelyn, still in a plain cardigan, her hair not done, her small hand caught in Vanessa's grip. Nia leaned forward without meaning to. "That's the hallway by the laundry room," she whispered. On the screen, Grace Brooks stepped out holding the repaired veil. There was no sound, but the picture was clear. Grace showed Vanessa something in the lace. Vanessa's face changed. Grant took the veil from Grace and turned his body so the hallway camera could not see his hands. Then, for 2 seconds, the screen flickered. Not missing, not broken, just covered by someone's sleeve. When the view cleared, Grant was putting something small into his inside pocket, and Vanessa was smiling again. Harrison's jaw tightened, but he still did not speak. Michelle swiped to the next file. "There's audio from the service elevator camera," she said. Grant took 1 step forward. "That recording may be privileged." Harrison looked at him. "It's a hotel hallway." Michelle pressed play. Vanessa's voice came through thin but unmistakable. "After tonight, the trust language activates. Harry signs the guardianship amendment, and no one will question the girl again." Grant's voice followed, low and irritated. The Brooks woman saw the bracelet. Then Vanessa, colder than any scream could have been. "Then remind her she is a seamstress who needs to be paid." Nia's hand closed around the sewing box so hard the latch clicked. Evelyn made a small sound behind Vanessa. Not a cry, only a breath that had nowhere to go. Patricia sat down slowly as if her knees had forgotten the room was. Watching, Harrison stood perfectly still. The blood had drained from his face, leaving him pale beneath the golden chandelier light. He looked at Vanessa, then at Grant, then at the name St. Agnes on the old photograph. But the thing that broke him was not the recording. It was Grace Brooks stepping through the service door in her work coat, rain on her sleeves, holding a folded copy of a complaint form in both hands. Nia turned. "Mama," she whispered. Grace did not look at the guests. She walked to her daughter first and touched her shoulder. Only then did she place the paper on the champagne table. "I sent this 7 years ago," she said quietly. Harrison read the heading at the top, Whitmore Foundation Patient Advocacy Office. Below it were the words "Missing Newborn, St. Agnes Clinic. No response from hospital staff." At the bottom, stamped in blue, was "Denied for insufficient evidence." The signature beneath it belonged to Grant Ellison. Harrison's mouth opened, but nothing came out. For all his buildings, his money, his foundation dinners, his speeches about forgotten families, a mother had knocked on his name and been turned away by the man he trusted most. Nia reached into the sewing box, took the old photograph, and set it beside the complaint form. Not dramatically, not angrily, just exactly where Harrison could not stop seeing both at once. The baby who vanished. The mother no one believed. The child who had walked through the service door because every grand entrance had been closed to her family. Harrison slowly removed the ring from his pocket and placed it on top of Grant's folder. Then he looked at Michelle, his voice calm enough to terrify the room. "Lock the doors and call Federal Child Services." No one moved at first because no one in that ballroom knew what to do when power changed hands without a raised voice. Michelle Reyes spoke into her earpiece, and within seconds the doors were guarded from the inside, not to trap the innocent, but to keep the truth from being carried out in someone's pocket. Vanessa stood beneath the wedding arch, still in her white dress, still holding the bouquet, but the room no longer saw a bride. It saw a woman, standing between a recording, a stolen hospital bracelet, and a child who had just begun to remember. Grant Ellison reached for his phone, but Harrison looked at him once and said, "Put it on the table." Grant obeyed. That was the first time Nia understood that rich men could sound quiet and still be obeyed. Federal Child Services did not burst in like a movie. They arrived 23 minutes later, after the guests had been moved to the far side of the ballroom and asked to remain available as witnesses. Those 23 minutes were the longest part of the night. Evelyn did not run to Grace. Grace did not force her to. She simply knelt near the champagne table, still in her wet work coat, and placed both hands open on her knees so the little girl could see she was not reaching to take anything. "You don't have to know me yet," Grace said, her voice breaking carefully, as if even grief needed manners around a frightened child. "You just have to be safe." Evelyn looked from Vanessa to Grace, then to Nia. "Did she really call me Maya?" she whispered. Nia nodded. Only when she prayed. That was the sentence that made Grace close her eyes. Harrison turned away for a moment, not because he was finished listening, but because he could no longer stand what his own name had allowed. His foundation had built bright waiting rooms and printed brochures about hope. But a mother with a missing baby had been denied because she did not have the right lawyer, the right clothes, the right kind of grief. When the child services supervisor arrived, Harrison did not try to control the conversation. He handed over the audio, the footage, the two halves of the bracelet, the photograph, the complaint form, and the ring. "The ring too?" the supervisor asked. Harrison looked at Nia. Nia looked back without smiling. "It fell when he heard me," she said. Harrison swallowed. "Then it belongs with the moment everything stopped." Vanessa finally spoke, her voice thin now. "Harry, please. You know me." Harrison looked at her for a long time, and the pain in his face was not love anymore. It was recognition. "No," he said softly. "I knew the version of you that needed me blind." Grant was escorted to a side room by security to wait for investigators. Patricia Caldwell sat rigid in the front row, her pearls still perfect, her face empty. The guests who had whispered about Nia now watched her as if she had grown taller without moving. But Nia did not look proud. She looked tired. Harrison noticed the red mark the sewing box latch had left in her palm. He crouched, slowly, so he was no longer towering over her. "I'm sorry," he said. Nia stared at him. "For not believing me? For almost letting them remove you before I listened." She considered that, then looked toward her mother. "My mama needs a lawyer who doesn't work for you." Harrison nodded once. "She'll have one by morning. Independent. Paid for by me, answerable to her." "And Maya?" Nia asked. Harrison's eyes moved to the little girl in white. "Protected first. Tested properly. No one will pull her anywhere tonight just to make adults feel better." Grace heard that and began to cry silently, not because everything was fixed, but because, for the first time in 7 years, someone powerful had said the careful thing instead of the convenient one. The ballroom emptied slowly. Statements were taken. Cameras were sealed. The flowers began to droop under the heat of the lights. Long after the music stands were folded and the untouched cake was wheeled away, Evelyn took one small step toward Grace. Then another. Grace did not grab her. She waited until the child touched the sleeve of her wet coat first. Only then did she whisper, "Hi, baby." Nia stood beside them, the old sewing box at her feet, and Harrison stood a few feet back, finally understanding that justice was not a check, not a speech, not a building with his name on it. Justice was a door opened when a poor child knocked with the truth in her hands. Outside, the rain softened against the glass, and inside the golden ballroom, the little girl everyone tried to silence became the reason the whole room had to listen.